Let's talk revision, folks. This is LaFaye, and I'm drawing my discussion of the philosophy of revision from chapter 13 with that title, From Revision and Self-Editing by James Scott Bell. It says, and you, in this presentation, because I think it's really important that each writer explores his or her definition of the philosophy of revision. Because our philosophy of revision, or our attitude towards it, is a huge part of what makes it successful. So if you have the opinion that rewriting is hell, then that's exactly what it's going to be like for you. On the other hand, if you think of revision as James Scott Bell does, as an opportunity to retake your final exam using your notes and the last version of the exam you wrote, then you're going to be much more successful. Me, on the other hand, I think of revision as a discovery process. You know, Bell uses the example of Michelangelo's David. He said that David, the creation of David, was a process of chiseling away all that was not David. And I think of writing as the revision process of writing as a discovery of what has not yet risen to the surface. Your subconscious knows so much more than your conscious mind does. And oftentimes in the revision process, you discover secrets your subconscious has been withholding. In this chapter, Bell talks about this process in reference to Stephen King's metaphor for it. He refers to the subconscious working beneath the surface as the boys in the basement. And the reality is we all have elements of our mind that are working unbeknownst to us, whether they be boys in the basement, they be a cloud factory, whatever metaphor you want to use to talk about the fact that your subconscious is working 24/7. It's important to recognize that you should put your subconscious to work for you. For instance, staying physically healthy is a big part of being good at writing, because the healthier you are, the happier you are, and the happier you are, the better you are at revising. It's very true. Also, if you get enough sleep, and you use physical exercise as a means of revving your subconscious engine, you can get even more writing done. For instance, let's say you've given yourself a timeline to write or revise for an hour, then it's time to get a little exercise. Give yourself a question to work on. Is there a scene that has been particularly tough for you? How can you phrase the difficulties you're facing into a question? Place that question into your mind and then head on out on a walk, a run, a bike ride, something physical that gets your body moving and your subconscious working. So that when you return to the desk and rewrite for another hour, you discover you have much more material to work with. Likewise, when you head to bed, put a revision question into your mind and allow your subconscious to do the work while you're sleeping. Keep in mind that it's not a bad idea to keep something next to your bed so that when you wake up in the morning, you can have a free writing session to bring out all the new raw material you have to work with. It's also important to be aware that you don't want to be too rigid. You don't want to be so married to what you wrote the first time that you don't want to change it. Now, keep in mind, change is not always about finding the right version of something. Sometimes it's just about finding a new version of something and looking at what it shows you about the story or the poem you're creating that might help you redo it in a new and even more exciting way. We don't always keep what we learn in revision, but we always keep what we learned and use it again in the next revision process or the next story. It's also important to think about the possibility of approaching your tasks as a writer from the perspective of a professional. Some people see writing as artistry. Therefore, they see their writing area like a studio. If that's you, then do something very creative and freeing at the beginning of your day. Make some art. Read some poetry. Listen to a podcast. Something that primes your creative pump. For other people, it's about putting yourself into the mindset of getting to work. Well, think about how other people get to work. Think about the possibility of dressing up into a business attire and heading into the office. Some people needed a commute. as part of their process. And you know what? Taking a drive, riding the subway, taking a bike ride, taking a walk, all of these things allow us to observe people and nature and elements of our environment which feed our subconscious and give us the materials we need to be an even better writer. So, giving yourself a commute in the morning, even if your office is downstairs or in the backyard, is a great way to prime your writing pump. Speaking of writing, you need to know what kind of writer you are and embrace it. For instance, if you're the type of writer who works painstakingly a page at a time to get what you want, then revise the same way. Look for just the right word by testing different words in different positions, just the right image by trying new images and new line breaks. Experiment, play, explore. If, on the other hand, you're the type of writer who writes and writes and writes and writes and writes, and then cuts away all that is not David, then that's what you should do in the revision process. Never take writing advice as law. Take it as a suggestion. Speaking of suggestions, let's take a closer look at some revising that allows us to see how revising applies to our own work. Let's just take an example of looking at a short piece of creative writing that we might be able to use to see how revision can work. Here is the opening of Passing Down. "I'm not some used car salesman you can bargain with, Muriel." Edna pointed the knife, seeing her sister's left eye perched on the tip. "So getting some fuzzy dice over the mirror is out of the question?" "Muriel!" Edna pressed the knife into the cutting board. "That bedroom suite wasn't just our mother's. It was our mother's mother before her. It needs to be passed down. It'd be passing down. To me. Who gets it after that? Pedro? The bird who will outlast me by 25 years? Easy. He's always loved dark woods." Setting her shoulders, Edna said, "It'll go to me, then to Marianne." Muriel holds her hands up to weigh things out. Covered in bird shit, sold at the first pawn shop to take it. Not sure which is worse. Looking at her sister with a blank but weighted expression, she said, "What do you think?" Notice that I revised even as I was reading, because revision is not a complete process. It is a process by which we continue to process, explore, and revise each time we look at a piece. Let's look at another option. "I'm not some used car salesman you can bargain with, Muriel." Edna pointed the knife. It looked as if she balanced her sister's left eye on the tip. "So getting some fuzzy dice over the mirror is out of the question?" Muriel ranked arguments right up there with colonoscopies. And ever since she'd ditched college and chosen a tour of the country via a used VW bus, her sister Edna acted like she'd been promoted to eldest because she didn't shirk her duties. Muriel would like to shirk something, all right. Suddenly she remembered her mother standing at the window of the van, handing her the only camera in the family. "Take photos everywhere you go. Send a few home when you can." And that was her mother's goodbye as she stepped back and waved before returning to the house while her dad finished a last-minute engine check, like she was preparing for takeoff. Edna hadn't even left her bedroom that morning. So in the first version, we have tight, terse, slanted dialogue that hints at the broiling tensions between these two sisters. But we don't know how old they are, we don't know where they are, and we don't know who the other characters they're referring to are. In this version, we get to see who the characters are, how they're related to each other, and how old they are. For instance, we know by the fact that Muriel has had experience with multiple colonoscopies that she herself is an older woman. We also know this because of her VW bus, and the fact that it was a family with a camera and they only had one. All of these things point to older women who are talking about a mother who is no longer with them. And also, we're diving back into backstory, because backstory is a big part of shaping who characters are in the present moment. So, it's important to recognize what our views are of revision, because that revision shapes our approach to it. And the more positive approach we have to our philosophy of revision, the better we are at revising. And this is true whether we're revising fiction, poetry, nonfiction, or our shopping list. So I hope this has been helpful to you, and that you have good ideas about how to apply the philosophy of revision to your own writing. Whatever your philosophy may be, embrace it, go with it, and have fun. Thank you.